Imagine for a moment that you are an archaeologist in the 1920s. You are standing in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, and you have just broken the seal on a door that has been shut for 3,000 years. Inside, the glint of gold is everywhere. This is the tomb of Tutankhamun, but amidst the awe, there is a haunting realization. All of this splendor, the gold masks, the statues of jackal-headed gods, the intricate rituals recorded in the Book of the Dead, it was all for one singular, desperate purpose: to cheat death. Welcome to the show. Today we are diving into a book that tackles the most fundamental question of our existence, a question that has obsessed emperors, pharaohs, and now modern scientists. The book is titled Why We Die, written by the Nobel Prize-winning molecular biologist Venki Ramakrishnan. It is a fascinating, and at times confronting, look at why nature includes an expiration date in our biology. I am Sarah, and I am ready to unravel the mystery of mortality.
And I am Alex, and I have to admit, this topic gives me a bit of existential dread right off the bat. But it is fascinating because, as Ramakrishnan points out, we are arguably the only species that actually knows we are going to die. A dog does not worry about its mortality, but we humans have built entire civilizations around the fear of it. Sarah, the book mentions that humanity has essentially come up with 4 plans to deal with this fear. It is like a coping mechanism menu. What are they? Because I feel like most of us just try to ignore it until we cannot. But apparently, history shows we are more strategic than that. The author references the philosopher Stephen Cave, who categorized these strategies. I am curious which plan we are currently banking on.
Right, so let us break down these plans. Plan D is legacy, living on through your children or your work, like Einstein or Shakespeare. Plan C is the soul, the idea that your essence survives the body. Plan B is resurrection, that you will physically come back. But the book focuses heavily on Plan A. Plan A is the biological approach, simply trying to stay alive for as long as possible. For centuries, this was just potions and alchemy. Think of the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. He conquered warring states, built the Great Wall, but he was terrified of death. He sent emissaries to find the elixir of life. Ironically, he likely died from toxic mercury potions he took to prolong his life. But today, Plan A has shifted from magic to molecular biology. We have doubled our life expectancy in the last 150 years, mostly by stopping early death from disease. But now, we are facing the hard limits of the human body. We need to understand the machinery itself.
Okay, so let us get into the machinery. Ramakrishnan uses this great analogy in the first chapter. He compares a cell to a city like London. You have transport systems, waste removal, energy generation. It is this massive, coordinated effort. But cities can last thousands of years. London is still here. My cells, however, are definitely not going to last that long. The book introduces this concept of the Weissman barrier, which I found mind-blowing. It basically says our bodies are just disposable wrappers for our DNA. Like, we are just the packaging. Can you explain that? Because it feels slightly insulting to think my brain and personality are just a temporary taxi service for my genes.
It is a bit humbling, isn't it? But yes, this is the distinction between the germline and the soma. The German biologist August Weismann figured this out in the 19th century. The germline cells, the sperm and eggs, are effectively immortal. They pass information to the next generation in an unbroken chain going back billions of years. But the soma, that is your body, your brain, your heart, everything else, is disposable. Once the soma has ensured the genes are passed on, evolution stops caring about it. It is the disposable soma theory. Think of it like a relay race. The baton is the DNA. The runner is the body. Once the runner hands off the baton, it does not matter if the runner collapses on the track. In fact, keeping the old runner alive might even be a waste of resources for the team. Evolution selects for fitness, which means reproduction, not longevity.
That is brutal. Nature is cold. But wait, if evolution only cares about us until we reproduce, why do we live so long after? I mean, humans live decades after our reproductive peak. And looking at the animal kingdom, there is this huge variation. The book talks about how a mouse lives maybe 2 years, but a bowhead whale can live over 200. And then there are these freaky creatures like the hydra and the immortal jellyfish. Are they actually immortal? Do they break the rules of this disposable body theory? It seems like some animals figured out a loophole that we missed.
The hydra and the immortal jellyfish are fascinating exceptions. The hydra is basically a tiny tube with tentacles that can regenerate its entire body. It does not seem to age. If you cut it, it regrows. It is biologically immortal, meaning its risk of death does not go up with time. But for most complex animals, size matters. There is this concept called Kleiber's law. Generally, bigger animals live longer and have slower metabolisms. A mouse's heart beats frantically, burning up energy and wearing out its machinery quickly. An elephant's heart is slow and steady. There is this spooky statistic that almost all mammals get about 1.5 billion heartbeats in a lifetime. A mouse burns through them in 2 years. An elephant takes 60. Humans are the odd ones out. We have managed to stretch our allowance to nearly 3 billion heartbeats, thanks to medicine and society. We are punching way above our weight class.
Speaking of punching above weight class, we have to talk about the rebels. The book highlights bats and naked mole rats. These things are tiny, so they should die young, according to the size rule, but they don't. A Brandt's bat is the size of a thumb and can live 40 years, and naked mole rats live 30 years and barely get cancer. What is their secret? Did they steal the elixir from the emperor? It suggests that the rules of aging aren't written in stone. If a rat can live 30 years, why can't we live 300?
That is the billion-dollar question. Bats likely live long because they can fly, so they escape predators. When you aren't getting eaten, evolution can afford to invest in better repair mechanisms for your body. Naked mole rats live underground, protected from predators and the sun. They have incredible DNA repair systems and stable proteins. They show us that biology can solve the problem of aging, but it usually only does so if the animal has a safe enough environment to make it worth the investment. For humans, we have made our environment safe, but our biology hasn't caught up yet. We are stuck with a maximum lifespan that hasn't really budged. The oldest person ever, Jeanne Calment, lived to 122. She died in 1997. Since then, no one has beaten her. It suggests there might be a hard wall we are hitting.
So let us dig into why that wall exists. Chapter 3 gets into the nitty-gritty. DNA, the master controller. Ramakrishnan explains that our DNA is constantly under attack. It is not this pristine library we imagine. It is more like a library that is on fire, and the librarians are frantically trying to tape the books back together. UV light, chemicals, even just the act of existing creates damage. The book mentions a scientist, Thomas Lindahl, who calculated that our DNA takes a beating of like 100,000 injuries per cell per day. That is terrifying. How are we not melting into a puddle of goo?
We don't melt because we have an army of repair enzymes. These are the unsung heroes of our survival. They patrol the DNA, snipping out damaged letters and pasting in new ones. It is relentless, but the star of the show is a protein called P53. Ramakrishnan calls it the guardian of the genome. When P53 sees damage, it stops the cell from dividing, so repairs can happen. Or, if the damage is too bad, it tells the cell to commit suicide. It is a failsafe against cancer. This leads to a paradox. Elephants have way more cells than us, so they should get way more cancer, but they don't. Why? Because they have 20 copies of the P53 gene. We only have one. That redundancy saves them. It is called Peto's paradox. It shows that longevity is partly about how good your repair manuals are.
Okay, so we have repair crews. But there is another problem the book discusses, and it has to do with the ends of our DNA, the shoelace caps, telomeres. This part was wild. Apparently, every time a cell divides, it loses a tiny bit of its DNA at the end because the copying machine can't reach the very edge. It is like the end replication problem. Eventually, the caps wear off, the shoelace frays, and the cell stops dividing. This is the Hayflick limit. Ramakrishnan tells the story of Alexis Carrel, a French surgeon who thought he had immortal chicken cells. He was wrong, but his mistake set science back for decades because everyone thought cells could live forever. But they can't. They have a countdown clock.
Exactly. Carrel was likely adding fresh cells to his petri dishes without realizing it. But here's the twist. Their times is times an enzyme that can rebuild those telomeres. It is called telomerase. It was discovered by Elizabeth Blackburn and Carol Greider. It adds the DNA back to the ends. You might ask, great, why don't we just bottle that and take a bath in it? The problem is, most of our adult cells turn this enzyme off. Why? Because unlimited division is exactly what cancer wants. Cancer cells reactivate telomerase to achieve immortality. So we are stuck in this catch-22. If we boost telomerase to stop aging, we might just give ourselves super cancer. The body shuts it down to protect us, accepting aging as the price for not dying of tumors in our youth.
This theme keeps coming up. Everything that keeps us alive also kills us eventually. Now, let us move to Chapter 5. This is where things get really sci-fi. Epigenetics. The book explains that if DNA is the hardware or the script, epigenetics is the software or the conductor interpretation. It turns genes on and off. The author uses Waddington's landscape analogy, a ball rolling down a hill into a valley. Once a cell becomes a skin cell, it is stuck in that valley. It can't just roll back up and become a brain cell. Or at least, we thought it couldn't. Then came Dolly the sheep.
Dolly was a game changer. John Gurdon and later the team at Roslin Institute proved that U-times could times take a specialized cell from an adult, put its nucleus into an egg, and reboot the system. You could push the ball back up the hill. This proved that our DNA doesn't lose the instructions for youth. It just silences them. We can unmute them. This led to Shinya Yamanaka discovering the Yamanaka factors, just 4 proteins that can turn an old skin cell back into a stem cell. It is like time travel for cells. We can literally reverse the age of a cell in a dish. The challenge now is, can we do that in a whole human without turning them into a chaotic blob of tumors?
It is incredible, but also scary. The book mentions that when they try this reprogramming in animals, sometimes they get teratomas, tumors made of teeth and hair and random tissue, total chaos. But there is another way to measure this age we are trying to reverse, the epigenetic clock. Steve Horvath found that by looking at the chemical tags on our DNA methylation, he could predict a person's age with terrifying accuracy. It is like counting the rings on a tree, but molecular. And here is the kicker. We age from the moment of conception. But when a baby is born, its clock is reset to 0. Biology knows how to wipe the slate clean. We just have to figure out how to trigger that reset button without starting a new life entirely.
And that brings us to the final hurdle the book touches on, garbage. Chapter 6 opens with the problem of waste. Inside our cells, proteins the workers get damaged. They misfold. They clump together. In young cells, we recycle this garbage efficiently. But as we age, the garbage disposal system gets clogged. This accumulation of junk is what leads to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases. It is not just about DNA scripts or telomere caps, it is about the physical clutter choking the cell. Ramakrishnan calls it recycling the garbage. If we solve the DNA problem but not the garbage problem, we might just end up with young DNA in a brain full of plaque.
It feels like we are playing whack-a-mole. You fix the telomeres, you get cancer. You fix the cancer, you get protein junk. You fix the protein junk, maybe your stem cells run out. Ramakrishnan seems to be saying that aging isn't one thing. It is a system failure, a collapse of the network. So, Sarah, where does this leave us? The billionaires in Silicon Valley are pouring money into solving death. But based on this book, is immortality actually possible? Or are we just sophisticated biological machines designed to break down once we have passed the baton?
I think the takeaway is that immortality in the sense of living forever is unlikely because of the sheer complexity of entropy. We fight physics, and physics eventually wins. However, extending the health span, the number of years we are healthy and active, is absolutely within reach. We are learning to tune the engine. We might not be able to turn a Ford Model T into a spaceship, but we can definitely keep it running for 200,000 miles instead of 100. Ramakrishnan ends on a philosophical note too. Death gives life meaning. It clears the way for the new. The very cycle of birth and death allows for evolution, for change, for new ideas. If the old generation never left, would the new one ever really have a chance to flourish?
That is a beautiful, if slightly terrifying thought. We are the leaf that falls so the tree can grow. Venki Ramakrishnan's Why We Die is a dense, brilliant tour of our own biology. It strips away the snake oil and gives us the hard science. It might not offer the elixir of life that Emperor Qin wanted, but it gives us something better, an understanding of what we are. And maybe, just maybe, understanding the machine is the first step to keeping it running just a little bit longer. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the limits of life. We will see you next time, hopefully not 1,000 years from now.